Hello everyone, welcome to Lean Leadership Part 3 of 3 webinars. I'm very glad that you've all been able to join. We have people from 33 countries with us today, which is a wonderful sign that Lean is spreading nicely across the globe. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. I'm very excited about this one because this one is focusing on value streams and value stream management and value stream mapping. And this is one of the I guess we could call it a methodology more than a tool in the lean management bucket that is one of the most powerful and unique things that we've seen in all of the years that I've been doing improvement, which is a long time, decades. So thank you for joining. Let's get into it. If you recall, from the first webinar we had, I introduced you all to the lean management triangle of principles, practices, and tools. And so if you look over here on the left side of this triangle, these are the management practices, and this isn't even really a complete list, but this is the bulk of the management practices that are either at the frontline level, the management, middle manager level, or even the senior leader level, and it includes process management as well. And then at the right side, we have all the tools that we've come to know that are helpful for analyzing processes and also for the countermeasures to counter waste that we might see in the process or other kinds of problems in these. So they're a little more design related. At the foundation of it all are the core principles: humility, respect, curiosity, etc. And these are the foundational and fundamental values, I guess I would say, that you need to have in order to be successful with any of these management practices and process design tools. And a lot of you that may be newer to Lean may only really know about the tools that you see over here on the right side, but it is a very complete management philosophy, and pretty much everything that you need to do in any kind of business or even a not-for-profit organization is in the Lean management bucket. Now, what we did in the first webinar was we covered those items. Part 1 is in blue, so we covered those items in blue of this bucket of principles, practices, and tools. And the green ones are what we covered in the second part. All 3 parts are, well, this one will be available tomorrow, but all 3 parts are stored on our webinar page, so if you haven't visited that, you can. And then we also have them posted on YouTube, Vimeo, and SlideShare. And then the materials are on SlideShare as well for those of you who might be new to it. So let's take a look at what we're going to talk about now in part 3 is the overall value stream management aspect. And it's really a very broad aspect of how you manage a value stream. So mapping is only part of it. And then as an analytical and design tool, value stream mapping in particular. Now, in terms of value stream mapping, if you're interested in some of the mechanics, because this webinar will not cover the mechanics since we're focusing primarily on why and why leaders need to be involved in it and that type of thing, there are 13 webinars on our webinar page. If you just click the value stream mapping subject area, you'll see 13 different webinars. There's a series of 3 webinars from earlier, I believe it was 2 years ago, I gave on the current state, designing a future state, and then creating the transformation plan and executing on that if you want to learn some of the mechanics. So there's a lot there. And then there's also the book that Mike Osterling and I co-wrote called Value Stream Mapping, and you'll see the cover of that in just a moment. So today what I'd like to cover is, what is a value stream? There's a lot of confusion out there on value streams versus processes, and I think it's very important to keep clear what we're talking about when we say value stream versus a process. And then what are the organizational benefits at looking at work through a value stream lens? There are many, many benefits. We'll go through quickly all of those benefits today. And then what's involved in a transformation cycle. So we think of transformation cycles as following either PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, or PDSA is my preference, Plan, Do, Study, Adjust. And you can also look at it in terms of DMAIC, although DMAIC's not typically viewed as a cycle, but it is certainly a methodology for improvement. And then what's the value stream map itself? Again, this is going to be, will be very, very light on this part of it today. So those of you that want to learn how to map the mechanics of mapping, please refer to the book or one of those webinars. And then why do we believe that value stream mapping is a team-based, leadership-heavy activity? Leadership-heavy, senior leadership-heavy. And then how does one prepare for those kinds of activities and develop the transformation plan? And then I'll thread some key success factors all along the webinar today. We'll go about an hour. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. And the materials, both in a full slide version, a PDF of full slides, and a PDF of 2 slides per page if you want to conserve some paper, are both available from your control panel. If you take a look at your control panel, both of those PDFs are listed there under the handouts section. All right, so let's get into it. Wherever there is a request and a deliverable, there is a value stream. Now, we're not talking about tiny little requests and tiny deliverables, and we're not talking about, in this case, even an internal customer requesting something from an internal supplier that's just one chain down or one link down the chain from them. We're talking about a fairly large chunk of activities that typically cross many, many functions. And that there are internal value streams that have an internal customer, and then there are external value streams that have an external customer. Those typically are referred to as your core value streams. So when an external customer is requesting any type of good or service, then that is the beginning of the value stream. And that's actually the beginning of the delivery value stream. And then when they receive it, then that's the end of the delivery value stream. Nowadays, many organizations are looking beyond the actual delivery value stream into some of the upstream activities that occur before a customer says, I want. So it could be anything from the sales cycle, design cycle, in the case of manufacturing, a lot of supply chain relationships. Those all can be depicted before you actually have a customer saying, I want. And then on the other end, after they receive a good or service, you might have a warranty section of warranty processes at the end, servicing whatever it is that they got at the end. There could be the whole payment cycle could go after the customer receives whatever they asked for, and so that value stream actually gets very, very broad. If you look at it over a whole enterprise, it gets very, very broad. So when you think about a value stream, you need to think about it in terms of these connected processes. And so there are many, many processes which are, kind of big deals in and of themselves that connect together to deliver value to a customer. And one of the things that's so powerful about looking at things through the value stream lens, and specifically getting a value stream map to be able to show that very simply and easily, that full range of delivery of value to a customer, is that in most cases, there's not one person in an organization that can articulate, even at a high level, the handoffs and the kind of passage of work through this value stream to deliver, whatever value the customer is seeking. And when you have not one person that can describe the entire chain of events, then that means that you've got a bunch of people that will make decisions based on the piece of the value stream they're aware of. So what we want to do is get this very holistic thinking all the way through the organization, especially at the senior leadership level, so that they can make better decisions. The business can be much more directed toward the true north that it's heading toward, and it's a much more powerful place for an organization to operate from versus a limited view of how work flows or doesn't flow across an enterprise. The value stream term was first defined in The Machine That Changed the World back in 1990 with Jim Womack, Dan Jones, and Daniel Roos. And then when Jim Womack wrote Lean Thinking in 96, he talked very specifically about a value stream being needing to look at a value stream. So first you define value in the eyes of the external customer. This was external customer. And then you look at what the value stream is. And in these days, back in the late 90s, we were thinking of value streams as just request to delivery or ring to ring or order to cash. I'm sorry, not order to cash, order to delivery, that type of thing. And now, as I mentioned, it's much broader in most settings. And then the next principle was flow, creating flow of the work across this value stream. And in those cases where you can't achieve flow easily, then there are these conventions that you can put in and tools you can use to create pull work through the system. And then, of course, always seeking perfection is the final principle that makes up the foundational aspects of what makes lean management lean management. Now, that book Lean Thinking did not talk about how to actually create the map. That came in 1999 when Mike Rother and John Shook wrote the kind of Bible for value stream mapping called Learning to See. And what they say is whenever there's a product for a customer, there is a value stream. The challenge lies in seeing it. Now, what was interesting about Learning to See, for those of you who haven't read it, it is a very manufacturing-centric book. And it's the value stream they look at is called Acme stamping. But it was the first time that we started to see how to visually depict work across a large swath of an organization in a way that enables ways to almost jumps off the page. I like to say that it jumps off the page if you're looking at a map on a piece of paper, or we always start with big paper and Post-its on a wall. To me, the obstacles to flow jump off the wall, and so it makes it so much easier to make good sound decisions about improvement when you've got that kind of visible look at how work flows. What is interesting about taking value stream mapping out of the manufacturing environment and into the service sector and into knowledge work and into creative work is that that type of work tends to not be visual to begin with. At least in manufacturing, much of the time we can see what's going on. Once you get out of manufacturing, it's very difficult to see the actual work steps. So in 2004, Bo Keat and Drew Locker put their book out called The Complete Lean Enterprise, which was a great step forward to bringing value stream mapping into the non-manufacturing world. And they were the ones that coined a metric that you'll hear about later on today that we love, and it's one of the most powerful metrics we've ever seen. And in this book, this was looking at the office side of manufacturing and how to apply value stream mapping in that setting. The book is still a bit manufacturing centric, although it does have a lot more applicability to the service sector outside of manufacturing than Learning to See did. I still believe, however, that everybody who wants to really understand mapping should read Learning to See no matter what industry you're in. It's a fabulous book. Now, Mike Osterling and I decided to write our book, Value Stream Mapping, kind of late in the game. And the reason why was because we felt that both in manufacturing and in non-manufacturing, there was a big part of value stream mapping that was missing from the equation and missing from the conversation. And that was senior leadership's role and why leaders are so critical in proper use of this tool or approach. And the other thing we found missing was all of the kind of upfront work you have to do in order to have a successful map be developed, and then all of the back end work on how do you execute on that map. We felt that both of those ends were kind of missing, so we wanted to make sure that everyone understood how to be more effective using mapping for any reason by being more clear about what's needed upfront and back end behind mapping. So that's why we wrote that book, and it's doing very, very well. We're very happy about that. So to get a little more into, well, what the heck is a value stream? You think about value streams being big chunks of work, and they're comprised of many processes that interconnect. And each process is comprised of many steps. Now, does that mean that there are only 3 levels of granularity when you look at work in an organization? Heck no. There's almost an infinite number of levels. So you have to take some liberties and make some decisions if you're leading an improvement effort on, well, how high do we need to go? And the question you need to ask to answer that question is, what problems are we trying to solve? What problems are we trying to solve? That gives you answering that question, and it doesn't come easily, by the way. You need some thinking and conversation to get to the answer to that question, but the answer to that question will lead you far more accurately toward what tool do I need to use? Do I need to process map, or do I need to take a look at this and step back and look at it from a value stream perspective? So what we like to talk about is this, kind of macro perspective that value stream mapping gives us is what's defining the strategic direction for improvement. Strategic direction for improvement. It gives you the what. What do we need to do? What do we need to do in the future state if we don't really, like how we're performing right now, or we want to get better? What do we need to do? What strategically? Heavy leadership involvement, because they're the ones that have this bigger vision and bigger view of the work of the goals and the mission of the organization, the purpose of the organization, the customer, the constraints that are out there, and the customer pressures in the marketplace and financial pressures, and the front lines just don't have that same level of awareness, and probably shouldn't, because they're worried. They need to be focused on getting the work done, not worried about those big picture things. And the leaders should not be worried about how many clicks you put on the computer to get data entered. That's for the front lines to improve. So by taking a look first at the high level and creating a strategic plan, what happens is that accelerates improvement, because you get leadership gets aligned from the beginning, and then the front lines are much better able to execute to that strategy. So when you move to the process step level and possibly use value stream mapping, that's when you get heavy frontline involvement. Middle managers are involved as well, and they're identifying the tactical, how are we going to execute? How should this work be done? So leaders, make strategic decisions, as they do in business, and front lines, execute on the how. That way you're getting everyone in the organization involved, from the front lines all the way to the senior most leaders. Another way to take a look at this, if you look at our actual value stream with actual example here, is let's just say that this happens to be an example for a health insurance company. Since almost everyone has health benefits, and most of the health benefits are employer sponsored, I thought this might be something that everyone could relate to. So when the insurance company approaches an employer, they start with some sort of discussions. The sales process starts pretty early on, and then at some point the customer says, okay, sign me up. And so they start the discussions about what terms and conditions will be in the contract, and then they get through to the stage where they're negotiating and actually executing that contract. And then probably a joint effort between the employer and the insurance company are communicating plan options and what the enrollment process is. And since this is late October, many of you are in open enrollment right now for next fiscal year. And then there's an enrollment process where the employees, once they select which plan they're going with, they get enrolled. And then there's everything after that is just servicing on that contract. So at a very, very high level, this value stream has 5 basic steps. And you can, take it on both ends. You could add a step here or there, but the chunks of activity or processes, 5 or more, is typically what we see in a value stream. We also don't see usually beyond about 15 blocks at a value stream level. If you get beyond 15, you've either gone way too low in details, or you've probably bitten off too much of a chunk at one time. So 5 to 15 is what we look to see. And then in this case, if you take just this negotiation block, you can see that then there's negotiating pricing and approving. There's an approval phase. And then there's a negotiation phase and another approval phase. And then there's executing the contract. And even this isn't all the way to the nitty-gritty process level with step by step by step. The whole negotiating pricing block has a ton of steps below it. So this is, giving you a sense of how there's different levels of granularity. And if we're trying to look at workflow at a very high level and the quality of work at a very high level, we would want to begin with a value stream. If we're trying to figure out why work is, maybe getting stuck between negotiating pricing and approve, or between negotiating terms and approve, then we might want to go to a process level. The reason why value stream mapping, or one of the reasons why value stream mapping is so powerful, is that most organizations are still structured in functional silos. So departments. It's a functional silo is, say the finance department, the customer service, marketing, IT, production, procurement, planning, logistics, shipping, the operating room, admissions. Those are all departments or functions. And it's kind of odd that we've structured ourselves that way all along, because really what the patient experiences or what the customer experiences in those value streams is this cross-functional connection between all these different players in the value stream. So your core value streams are those that deliver some sort of good or service to an external customer. Those are your core value streams. And then within all organizations, there are a number of support value streams that may or may not cross all functions, but they cross many. So for example, the hiring process, the whole cycle of recruiting and selecting and onboarding and even the post-onboarding work, that is a gigantic support value stream. The external customer doesn't care about how you get that done. They care only that you've got good people that can get the work done. So that's a support value stream that support the delivery of value to customers. And then you can even take a look at, in some of the more complex value streams, both internal and externally focused value streams, there are some reasons sometimes you have to look at the value stream segment and start with just that, because it's such a big part of the value stream that it's, meaty enough to look at on its own. So for example, in the case of, both manufacturing and non-manufacturing, has some sort of new product development cycle. And you could technically say that's part of one gigantic enterprise value stream, but on the other hand, it's so complex on its own that it warrants often taking a separate look, usually taking a separate look at it as a value stream segment, and then connect it with the larger value stream once you've gotten that one improved. So in Learning to See, we were introduced to the term product families, and in manufacturing, this is exactly what you do. You take a look at each of the functional areas, or the, maybe this would be separate operations in manufacturing. In non-manufacturing, it could be departments, and you take a look at different products. So each row is a different product or a different SKU in manufacturing, and you figure out, which of the steps does that particular product flow through toward the customer. And anywhere where you've got a match, then you can create one value stream map for those those two SKUs may actually seem very separate or very different when it comes to the marketplace, but when it comes to the work itself, they're actually very similar. So those become one product family. Now, in the non-manufacturing world, so healthcare, financial services, government, distribution, transportation, everything else, oil and gas, everything else, we often don't use the product family grid the way we have learned it in manufacturing. We often use what's called a scoping diagram. Some people call this a scoping tree. Some people refer to it as a version or a variation of a problem breakdown tree, but it's a way to narrow in your focus because you can't map everything at once. So in this case, we have this fictional company, Golden State Equipment, who makes both capital equipment and spares and subassemblies. And then within capital equipment, they have catalog items, configure to order, engineer to order, and then brand new product development. And then within engineer to order, they have custom hardware, custom software, or both. And so for the value stream mapping to be effective, you have to narrow your scope quite a bit on the current state, more than what seems logical or reasonable or comfortable. And you focus it in, and in this case, the team chose to follow the capital equipment engineer to order, needing both custom hardware and software. So that is the path that they decided to take. Now, we have had value stream mapping activities where the path that we decide to take, once you get to the end of this branching, represents only about 10% of the business or 15% of the business. And senior leaders will sometimes get very, very nervous about that. Like, why are they only looking at that amount? Well, that's only for the current state. In fact, what typically happens is once you narrow your focus and can get the current state map done and done well, and you start designing the future state, then the future state design typically ends up applying to a far broader cross-section of the work. And so that's when you can start deciding whether or not you can combine two different sets of conditions onto one map, or if they need two separate maps. Getting back to this look, does it need one map or do we need two maps? So there are some conventions you can use to combine maps together, but you want to make sure that they remain visually simple so that people can easily read them and not overcomplicate them. So when you think about value stream mapping, think about being, in this beautiful hang glider, like hanging up way high above the work. Process level mapping gets us down into the weeds where you're actually like down between the blades of grass, whereas value stream mapping, you're soaring way up above the whole work. And you see things differently when you're at this level. For example, think about being in a helicopter hovering over a freeway system. So if you take a look at this freeway system, you can see things that you'd never be able to see if you were actually in a car. So what do you see? You see here we've got some pretty big congestion going on in this section of the freeway, and we've got some very, very open on-ramps and off-ramps here, and then we've got kind of, middle flow going on here. If we were down in a car, especially if we're in this red car right here, there's no way we're going to see this congestion up here. So value stream mapping pulls us up so that we can see things from a very different perspective. And many of the maps we see are done at too low a level and with too low of a level of people in the organization. This is a strategic, senior level, high level view of workflow across a very large section of the organization. Down here, this is more like process level. Now we're in a car and we can see just a little bit ahead of us. We can't see much ahead of us. We can't see much behind us, but we can see what we might have to correct right here at the tactical level. And this is where the front lines get involved. So everyone gets involved. No one's making decisions without there being a line of sight and connection between senior leaders and the front lines. The other reason why this is so critical is that we see teams all the time start trying to do improvement, and then someone at a senior leadership level will say, whoa, 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 no, 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 no. We did not authorize that. No, we're not doing that. You want to eliminate that by getting them involved in the first place. So this is an example of, let's say that we're in Indianapolis and we want to get to Dallas, Texas by car. When you look at the map, you've got some options. You've got 3 different route options you can see over here. And what senior leaders do is they decide the path they want to take to get where they want to go at a high, high level. That's what value stream mapping is like. Deciding how are we going to get there at a high, high level. What do we need to do at a high level to get somewhere? And then you pass the baton to the front lines for the details of, now that we're going to take this road, then here's how we'll navigate this little obstacle, and here's what we'll do, and this is the rest stop we'll take along the way, and then we'll go site C right here and see some nice little site in Memphis, and then we'll get back on the road. That's more the purview of the front lines and middle managers. So what value stream mapping enables us to do is take all of these disconnected silos and link them together powerfully on one sheet of paper. Senior leaders need to be the ones intimately involved in creating that one sheet of paper, because this level of thinking isn't natural to most leaders. And so getting them this practice in starting to think this way helps them be a more effective leader everywhere in the organization. What we want to do is make sure that you don't have, I'm going to go ahead and go to this one. In this case, we've got one department here, one functional area that's doing great. They've been good at making improvement. They're really performing well, and yet they're performing so well in relationship to the other functional areas that the boat can't possibly go in a straight direction the way that perhaps the organization wants it to go, because you've got this one top performer with others that are kind of medium performers. What we want to do is get everyone top performing at the same pace, which sometimes means in the initial rounds of improvement, you may need to actually slow one department down so that they're not putting out, and getting these big queues in front of the next department. You want to not get the whole organization to slow down. Obviously, we want to speed up, not slow down, but we need to do it at a pace where everyone's kind of working together at that pace, and then you speed it up together at that pace. You don't want to sub-optimize, because that's wasted improvement effort that the customer never gets to experience. So the other thing that value stream mapping is really valuable for outside of manufacturing, even more so than manufacturing, is making problems visible. Most of the time when we have information and data flying around an organization, no one has any ability to quickly see what's really going on. So this is an example of a value stream map where the value stream had significant problems with disconnected IT systems. So you don't need to read these blocks. That's not the point of this. I want you to look at the colored lines and notice that in this block 4, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 touch points. They're touching 5 different systems, so there's that kind of redundancy. You look here, process block number, I think this is 7, we've got 3 touch points. Process block 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. Think about the wasted time that people are entering and re-entering and entering in this system and then toggling to that system. Those seconds or minutes add up, and they add up fast in a big organization. So this is a way that you can just quickly visualize this significant problem where the IT systems aren't connected. And in this particular case, what was very cool about, it's always cool to see what leaders do when they see value stream mapping, and it reflects the work as it actually is, not what they think it is, not what they wish it was, but what it actually is. The CIO, Chief Information Officer, came into a briefing after the team got this done. It was on a wall with Post-its at that stage. And, his eyes got big as saucers, and he said, oh my gosh, now I get it. I really, truly didn't understand until I could visually see this, how disconnected we actually are. And that began some reallocation of budget and the ability to start linking some of these systems together. Very powerful when you have leaders seeing work this way. Here's another example of a value stream. And in this case, again, you don't need to read what's in the blocks. I want you to see the structure of it. Notice that here we've got a little bit of branching. 40% of the work goes into this block and then to block 3, whereas 60% of it goes into this block and then into block 3. So here's where you can add a little bit of variation, but not a lot, to a value stream map, because this is, kind of still, you're still able to simply depict this, but you don't want to get overcomplicated. And so that's a beautiful thing to see, that kind of little minor branching. Now we don't need 2 maps, we've got 2 different conditions on 1 map. The other thing you'll see are a series of serial handoffs, and you'll notice the color coding. That color coding reflects each functional area. So all of the yellow is one function, all of the red is one function, all the green is one function, etc. And that just allows the eye to see the bouncing back and forth of work as it's flowing or not flowing throughout the system. You'll also notice these vertical columns of blocks. These processes are all occurring concurrently, or virtually at the same time. So that allows you to actually see what's happening simultaneously in multiple departments for the work as it's flowing through the system. And again, this is just to show you some of the structure and why value stream maps look and feel very different from a process level map. This is high level. And then if I just could, show you one thing, like hold a kickoff meeting, there are 25 process steps that actually make up this one block once the team took it down to the process level. The other one that was really big was, let's see, what was it? Oh, train the client. This block had, I think, 40 different process steps at the process level. And you'll also notice that this map is one of the rare ones where we labeled them value-adding steps or necessary steps, and then everything without one was deemed non-value-adding. Usually in a value stream map, we don't take this time, because usually the value stream's at such a high level that every block has both value-adding and non-value-adding work within it, because we're at a high level. So we typically don't label it. This particular value stream map lent itself to doing this, but it's very rare that we do that at the value stream level. We always do it at the process level. So another big benefit of having senior leaders involved. Now, I haven't defined senior leader yet, so let me just be very clear about this. When we do value stream mapping in clients, it is director and above with very few exceptions, and we push hard for vice presidents and C-level, chief level executives. Now, in a Fortune 100 company, we're hardly ever going to get a C-level on a mapping team. It will be vice presidents and senior vice presidents and probably a good smattering of directors. In a very small organization, the founder, the GM, or the president is almost always on a value stream in a very small, like 40-person company. And then it's everything in between, depending on the size of the company, the level of authority, which is the big determinant is who has authority to design the future state. What you don't want is a team of people that can come up with all these great ideas, and then they have to go out and sell it to senior leadership. The problem with that is that, first of all, it slows down in the improvement cycle, but more importantly, when leaders haven't been in the room to hear the conversations, there's like really intense conversations that go on, very detailed, very intense, lots of thinking, hard work, smart decision making, and to have to go out and repeat that to another body of people that weren't in the room is just, it's almost impossible to ever really get them to understand how a team came to the conclusion that they came easily. So getting those senior leaders to align at the top, even though it takes time from their schedules, it's important work. It's really no less important than an annual business plan for a business. You're talking about how work flows across your entire business, how value is delivered to your customers. This is big stuff. That's why we're in business, is to deliver value to customers. So, if you have trouble getting your leadership team to agree to sit in a room and participate in this level of mapping, there are all kinds of things you can share with them that help them understand the value. But the biggest benefit, or the biggest way to sell them, is to convince them to do just one with you, just once. And then at the end of that, we have never had a senior leader say, well, that was a waste of my time. In fact, it's been quite the opposite. They've said that's been the best. In our case, we do 3 days typically. That's been one of the best 3 days I've ever had at this company. So here's an example of why you don't want managers and supervisors and front lines on a value stream mapping team. We're talking about big decisions, not little decisions, big decisions, like we're going to get rid of commission, and we're going to put annual profit sharing, or we're going to get rid of individual commission and we're going to go to team-based commission. We're going to insource this current outsourced activity. We're going to restructure the entire way we work with the brokers that we work with. We're going to merge these 2 departments. We're going to shift work from this department to another one. We're going to push authorizations down 2 levels. We're going to eliminate a department without layoffs. We don't lay off as a result of lean work. The staff get redeployed to other areas, but you can eliminate, and we often see eliminating a department. And cross-training in another department. We just did a thing in a healthcare facility, a hospital. We merged what had been a registration area and a reimbursement insurance area and merged them into one department to get rid of that handoff and get rid of the patient having to experience 2 steps in the process. And there's no one in the front lines that could have authorized that. So these are the kinds of decisions we're looking to make. So the way to visually show this to the front lines and to senior leaders to help them get a little more clear on their rightful role in improvement, you can talk about senior leadership being in the strategy level, what has to happen, and the kinds of tools or practices that are helpful for that are strategy deployment, also known as Hoshin planning and value stream mapping. And then when you pass the baton to the front lines on the how it will happen, there's projects, Kaizen events, or rapid improvement events, just do it, daily Kaizen or kata, and then middle managers kind of straddle that line in between these 2. So they typically are not in value stream mapping unless it's a very small organization. They're typically more involved in the how than the what, but it does depend on the level of authority managers are given in your organization. Every once in a while, we'll see organizations that call people managers that are acting kind of like vice presidents. So when you think about the whole improvement cycle and it all being divided into a plan, do, study, adjust cycle, value stream mapping has kind of a middle role to play. So the outer cycle would be setting annual goals and priorities for the company, or in the case of a very, very large company, it might be division level goals and priorities. It might also be department level, but that'd have to be a pretty big company to have it be a department level external cycle. And then you might even want to use high-level A3 management to take a look at, here's where we are now performance-wise, here's where we want to go, that's the gap, now how are we going to get there, and use a high-level A3 process to kind of plan through that. Value stream improvement typically is kind of a middle level. If you use strategy deployment at all, it's middle level plan, do, study, adjust cycles, and it's because you're looking at work across a big chunk of the organization that is needed to be improved in order to achieve the annual goals or priorities that are being set. And then within after you get the value stream plan, the action plan together on what needs to be done, then those are executed with projects, RIEs, etc., and that's like a micro PDSA cycle. And then, by the way, there's another PDSA cycle in here when you're actually creating the improvement. There is a plan, do, study, adjust cycle in there as well. So there are these nested PDSA cycles. But I just wanted to show you where the value stream improvement lies kind of in the hierarchy of looking at improvement planning from top to bottom. So now you see your first simple value stream map. Very simple. This is not how the real world ends up, but very simple to show some structure where you've got a customer. In this case, the jaggy roof means it's an external customer, and they are ordering and then they are receiving, or requesting and receiving. And then that's information flow shows the IT systems and applications that are used to help the work move through the value stream. So what types of information are being stored and drawn upon in order to get work to flow through the value stream. The middle section of the map is the workflow itself. So this would be, every one of these blocks has some sort of output that goes to the next process. So the output could be a report, it could be an electronic set of information, it could be a phone call, it could be a contract, it could be a patient, it could be a tube of blood, it could be some sort of a study. It's any kind of output that's then going to the next part of the process. It could be a form, etc. But these are the process steps at that process level. And then there's a timeline that reflects the time it takes to get work to flow through the system as compared to the time it takes to actually do the work. I'll explain in a minute a little more about that. And then there's also a quality metric that is, Mike Osterling, who I work with a lot, calls it the hidden beast. The hidden beast is this quality metric, and he is so right. I'll explain a little more about that. And then you have summary metrics of all of the time and quality metrics that you take a look at. Oh, and here are, in manufacturing, there's a triangle that's often used to depict WIP. It happens to have an I on it, which stands for inventory, but it's actually an icon that represents WIP. We happen to use like an old-fashioned inbox at times, and I've also seen gravestones, but I think that's depressing, so we use inboxes. So let's talk about time. So just a real quick, and this is something that takes leaders a little while to grasp, and once they get it, then they start using this thinking every day all over the organization. Very powerful. So lead time is a time between the work is received and could be done until it's actually done and passed on to the next process in the value stream. So each process block in a value stream has a lead time. The whole value stream has a total lead time. Within the lead time, somewhere in there, the actual work gets done. And that's called process time, also known as cycle time, which we don't use because cycle time is also used to mean lead time. So it just gets very confusing. Also sometimes called touch time. We tend not to use touch time because TT is also an abbreviation for takt time. And so we just found that process time was one of the least confusing of all the options. The process time could be done all at once, where the work is picked up here, so it's been sitting in queue up until the red line here, and then it's done consecutively, and then it's done there. And now in this case, it's sitting in queue before it's handed off to the next department. So there's some sort of a batch being done. Oftentimes, the process time is actually in segments where it starts maybe sooner when it gets in, and then there's some delay because people are waiting to clarify what they're supposed to do, or they're waiting to get information to correct something that they got. That's where the rework comes in and extra delays come in, or sometimes it's done all at once. So the process time can be distributed across the lead time, or it could be all done in one chunk. Work is idle anywhere where you don't see process time. True flow, process time equals lead time. So if you had true flow, there'd be no delays whatsoever. And that's what you're aiming toward, although it's hard to ever get there, but that's what you're aiming toward. Now, the quality metric, we always measure, or often, I guess I shouldn't say always, we often measure quality of the product the customer receives. So I call that end process quality. So at the end of the process, what's the quality that the customer receives? The metric that we have found to be the hidden beast and so powerful that Drew Locker and Bo Keat first defined in their book, The Complete Lean Enterprise, is called percent complete and accurate. Many of you are aware of that already that are on the webinar. Some of you are very new to this. So I'd like to just explain what this is. This measures what we call in-process quality. So it asks basically, hey, process 2, what was the quality of your input you received, which is process 1's output? What percentage of the time can you do whatever you're supposed to do without having to do any form of rework? And we define rework as correcting information that's wrong, adding information that's missing and should have been supplied, or many more common times we see clarifying information that could have been clear to begin with. So we're not saying we shouldn't clarify. We are saying we want to reduce the need to clarify because that is a form of rework. And that's when we added to Drew and Bo's definition, we added that clarification. So if you go along the chain, you keep asking people what's the quality of output where they don't have to do any form of rework, and everyone answers, based on their experience. So it is a squishy metric. We call that a squishy metric. But if the people are given a safe environment to tell the truth, it's actually pretty darn accurate. And we're not looking for precision. We are looking for accuracy. It's called a directional metric. And that's what we do to look at how we can improve the need for rework by getting better work being delivered in the first place. And a quickie on this one. At a value stream level, we often see that there's tension between different departments, in large part because they're not receiving the quality of work that they want. And this opens up the door to a great conversation between two departments that maybe did have a little friction or tension. And often it just, most of the time actually, it melts away once they understand what the actual needs are. It's typically a very healing kind of metric to talk about. Once you get the metrics done, then you have, and by the way, there are other metrics you can add in addition to that, like effectiveness. In sales, for example, we'll say, okay, well, of all these RFQs that you receive and you respond to, how many actually result in a sale? That would be an effectiveness metric. In the case of manufacturing, there are metrics we look at like OEE, overall equipment effectiveness. We look at capacity, we look at all kinds of extra things. So I'm only focusing on the two key ones that are in almost all maps, which are the time and quality metrics. So the 5-process block current state that you saw now has developed into a 3-process block future state. These little guys, called Kaizen bursts, are on the future state to show this is the blueprint, this is where we're going, and this is how we need to get there. These are the things that need to be put in place in order for this future state to become our current state. And if we do all of that, we believe that these are the metrics that we'll be looking at. This is, just a projection based on smart people that know about the process that are able to give these projections. So the projections in this case are that they'll get a 50% more than 50% reduction in the lead time. They'll be able to free up the equivalent. This isn't a real FTE. This is the equivalent of 22 FTEs worth of capacity that they can then use to absorb additional work or have them be able to do more product development for new services, have them work on more improvement. I mean, there's all kinds of things. You might be able to get people that are salaried to actually go home after 50 hours or 55 hours and not 70 or 80. Those kinds of things are the organizational benefits of freeing capacity. No layoffs, never ever, not as a result of lean. Then huge gains in quality, huge gains in this case. They were looking at on-time delivery and the number of change orders being produced. That was another goal that this particular team had. So this is the kind of table you could put together to compare pre and post improvement based on your projections. Now, how do we do this? We use a 3-day model because it's tough to get leaders, period, and it's tough to get them 3 different days, 3 different weeks, and we lose momentum and we have a lot of mental rework if we divvy up the days and have time in between each of the stages of the activity. So the actual activity of creating the map is the means to making decisions. That's all it is. It's not about the map. It's about making decisions and putting together an action plan. But we do need to create and understand the current state, and drawing a current state map is a great way to understand the current state, very effective. We need to design the future state, and then we need to develop the plan for how you're going to get from current to future state. So 3 to 4 days. We're starting to call this an accelerated learning and design activity, ALD, because when people hear event, they think of Kaizen events. Value stream maps would never be done during a Kaizen event because Kaizen events are filled with what type of people? Front lines. Value stream maps are done by who? Not the front lines. So we're wanting to make that clear distinction in what we call these things. 4 to 8 weeks prior to these 3 days that the team's together, then there's a lot of preparation, data collection, those types of things. Charters developed, charters socialized, lots of discussions about why are we doing this, what do we hope to achieve, what are our goals. The team is formed. That's not an easy thing. A lot of discussion about who are the people that should be on the team, very strategic, and then preparing the team for what they're going to experience on those 3 days allows you to come in on that first day and hit the ground running. And then 3 to 9 months following those sessions is the period typically that is required to execute the transformation plan. Again, these are big changes, big decisions, not small decisions. These things take time, 3 to 9 months, 12 at the absolute longest, and 3 is actually pretty tough to pull off unless you're really narrow in your focus. Business moves very, very quickly. 3 months is not a lot of time. Now, the charter itself, not going to go into all the details here because some of the webinars that I mentioned before have all the details, but just basically, you know, it has 3 major sections. What and why are we doing this? This is the most commonly missing part of an organization getting consensus and understanding across the whole organization that this is why we're doing this. And who needs to be involved? We've got, you know, accountable parties. I'm not going to go into the details here. It's in the book if you'd like to read it, value stream mapping. Then who are the mapping team? Who should be on call, not full-time on the team, but on call? And who are people that need to attend the daily briefings? We do love daily briefings to keep everyone in the loop. And there's a special team that, a special list of those people. And then when and where are we going to do it? So the logistics part of the charter. You can download a charter at ksmartin.com/VSM-charter. Now, the charter, the primary and the first decision that I mentioned earlier that has to be decided is what are you trying to solve? What problem are you trying to solve? Usually people start with a pretty vague idea of what gap they're trying to close, and part of that 4 to 8 weeks is getting very, very clear on the gap, which often involves data analysis and taking a look at the true current state compared to what people think it is, and getting some better insights before you walk into the room, because you can accelerate mapping discussions that way. And so it's important to be very clear on the volume of work that comes in, whatever you're mapping, the scope of and the conditions that you've set, and also, you know, how the work is actually performing. So this is an example of a real value stream map that you can now read a little more easily. And this one, you'll see there's a lot of noise going on up here in the information flow. This happens to be for marketing campaigns, and you'll see metrics down here below there. And then you'll notice also that, we didn't mention this yet, but during the current state, remember you've got senior leaders on this team. They're not going to know all the details and all the process, you know, metrics and all the quality metrics. So we actually walk the value stream much of the time. And if we can't physically walk it because of remote locations, and you know, we have virtual work teams in some cases, then we'll call people and get them on the phone or videotape, you know, video them in, webcam them in, and learn more about the process from their perspective. Again, this is not micro detail. This is not process mapping. It's value stream mapping. But senior leaders usually at the end of day one are having kind of a sobering look on their face, like, wow, you know, now we understand the obstacles that our people are going through and why work is so hard to get done. And then that makes them motivated to really help and to get better and better in the future state design. So it's a necessary and actually pretty powerful place for leaders to get to that place where they go, oh, wow, this is hard. Now we see. For the briefings, the reason why we bring in the peer group of the senior leadership team, again, this is not typically a frontline activity. We bring them in for about an hour at the end of every day, and on day one, it's so that the mapping team can share their insights, and they want to share their insights so that they're starting the process of reducing resistance to change, which is going to come on day two. You want to get that resistance kind of down from the beginning because everybody sees the truth about the current state and what the opportunity is to improve that current state. So it's very important to have these briefings. Day two, now the team says, hey, here's what we'd like to do. Is there any reason why we shouldn't? Are we missing anything? And you want to have that spirited conversation or that debate real time in the mapping activity so that you don't get all the way through to a completed map and plan, start socializing it, and have part of the leadership team say, what are you guys thinking? No, we're not doing that. So you want to get that done in the event. And then day 3 is to gain commitment for the action plan, because a lot of times if companies haven't been doing this kind of improvement at this level for very long, they'll think that you could just kind of wave a magic wand and it'll all go better. And once you see the action plan, you see the number of steps that will need to be undertaken in order to get these improvements in place, and the number of resources that will be needed in time. This is where kind of the truth starts hitting people in the face, and rubber meets the road, and they have to decide, yes, I'm going to sign up for this and I commit to this and I will help, and it's going to be painful, but we'll get through it, or no, I don't want to do that. And you want to have, again, that conversation in real time while their mapping is being done. So this is that same marketing campaign. This is the future state map. The Kaizen bursts are color-coded for different types of improvement, and you can see a vastly cleaned up IT system, vastly cleaned up. And so this did have a fair amount of IT changes that needed to be made because it's a really IT-heavy product. So that gives you a sense of the future state map. People get confused about the bursts and where they should go. You can put Post-its on the current state map that show the problems, that in a reminder, these are the problems we're seeing, but the Kaizen bursts are the solutions or the problems that need to be solved. And very often our maps have, I'd say maybe only a third of those bursts are actual countermeasures or solutions. The rest of them are typically problems that need to be going through their own cycle in order to get to the solution. And then there's also a transformation plan or an action plan of some sort that comes out of it. You can either number the future state blocks so that you know which block that improvement is going to affect, or you can number the Kaizen bursts. I've seen it both ways. And then what the target is, what the proposed countermeasure or problem is that's going to be solved. That's what's the content inside those bursts. And then sometimes we go so far as to say, how are we going to execute these things? Are these things that lend themselves well to Kaizen events? Are they things that just are going to be a traditional project? Or in rare cases, we'll have a just do it. We also are starting to use a lot more of what we're calling an RPE, rapid planning event. A rapid planning event is like a Kaizen event, only there's no improvement made in the event. It's a plan. And sometimes for big changes that are very cross-functional, you need to have that cross-functional consensus building and planning to design what has to happen, and then you can either move into a project or a Kaizen event to actually execute on it. It's a pretty powerful mechanism for rapid decision making that we've been finding very effective. And then we have a Gantt-ish chart. This one happens to go January through December, and then you can see the X's show when the particular improvement is going to start and when it's going to stop. And then this status bar shows the ability you have to show the % done, and then these are the review dates. So in a minute here, we're going to talk about who owns this plan. Who owns the transformation plan? Everybody that's an owner of each line item is a member of the mapping team, and someone from the mapping team typically is the owner of the plan. And they make sure that the meetings are held with the mapping team, the statuses are gotten. This is a discussion together. This is not a one-on-one. The team gets back together again. They can do this virtually. The mapping itself needs to be in person, but they can be virtual for the reviews, and they look at how are we progressing? Where are our obstacles? Is there anything that we thought we needed to do that we should cross off the list that we no longer need to do? That type of thing. So once you get the improvement done, then there's managing the value stream. So again, senior leaders need to be very involved in setting what the value stream KPIs are. This is very holistic. These are holistic KPIs that are very closely tied to the annual business goals of the organization at the senior most levels. And so you do need to have process level KPIs as well, but we're talking about big value stream KPIs. They need to be operations heavy. You can have financial targets, but it should be very heavily skewed toward operational metrics, and they need to be on visual boards that are being tracked on a regular basis. Now, as far as owning both the plan and the KPIs, we love the term value stream owner, and companies that are using this are finding it very effective. It's not easy to transition to this kind of ownership because it doesn't fit neatly on an org chart. So this is a designated person at typically a director level, could be a manager level, typically not VP or above because they're focused more on vision and future, and you want someone who can really pay attention to the performance of the value stream. And they're also the one that is deciding, okay, we're trending in a downward direction. We need to get a team together and do some good problem solving here and figure out what's going on and then get us back on track. So they're the ones that kind of rally together the troops when it's time to take another look at improvement. And I'm talking about kind of the bigger level issues, because once you get really good at this, problems are being resolved on a daily basis where the work is being done, and they're not finding their way up to the value stream performance. That's the whole point of daily improvement. But initially, there can be some slips at an overall value stream level that this person needs to go, okay, we need to take a look at this. So they're monitoring those KPIs on an ongoing basis. Here's an example of how we've done this, where we have, there's this is in healthcare, 3 different value streams with a value stream owner, and then the value stream was actually broken into chunks because they were very big value streams and given kind of process ownership for those chunks of the value stream. So that's another way you can do it, where you're kind of, having this nice kind of this continuum of looking at performance from process to value stream perspective, and then from value stream to the business and how it's operating as it should be, and whether it's on goal, on track, on not. You have to have someone that's paying attention to that. And then here's another way. This was a client that broke their value stream into chunks and had 3 different people responsible for those chunks of the value stream. This is one value stream with 3 chunks, but there's still one person, Christine, who owns the whole value stream, meaning that she's watching it on a very regular basis. We were talking like, weekly performance. And she's, starting to pull together teams that need to intervene when it's time. She doesn't control anything. She's really a project manager in a way, but she is in the operation. So that's another thing that we see a big high failure rate, is when people have their internal improvement teams, the lean team, the black belt team, whoever, owning value streams. No, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. The operation needs to own it. The internal improvement teams are there to teach, guide, coach, they're there to support. So then we repeat. Once you get one round of improvement, it does not stop. What we find is that value streams will get improved and then no one looks at them for 3 years. And then they become, pretty much back to their state. There's a concept known as entropy, E-N-T-R-O-P-Y, which means that the natural state of things is chaos. And if you don't, pay attention to things and put structure around things, you will get chaos. And you do. And so if you don't pay attention to the value streams, they decompose. So in closing, I'd like to remind you that it's not about the map. We talk about value stream mapping, and in fact, we didn't want to have our book called Value Stream Mapping because it's not about mapping. Mapping is the means. Mapping is not the end state or the outcome we're going for. It's a team-based conversation tool to uncover the truth about the current state and have good conversations about what should be done for the future state and decisions made as a result, and then a plan developed on how to execute those decisions. It's not about the map. The map is a powerful tool, but it's just the means to true transformation. So to learn more, there's another reference to the 3 books that I showed in the beginning. There's also a plethora of workshops and conferences. Mike just gave a workshop on Monday of this week at the AME conference in Dallas, Texas. So I'm sure he'll be offering that next year, and the conference is in Boston next year in October. Fantastic conference. Very, very, very good conference. And then LEI and Shingo are 2 of the other ones that tend to have value stream mapping workshops. I just would encourage you to go to a very reputable source for your learning, because there's a lot of value stream maps out there that we're seeing that just are so not value stream maps. So be careful. Buyer beware. All right, and so then there's also the webinars you can take a look at. So that's all I wanted to share with you today. High-level leadership, long planning cycle, 3 days in a row, great transformation plan, use briefings, make sure you get adequate data in advance so that you understand the current state and can share that with the team on day one. And that's, it's a leadership-led activity. So let's go to questions. I see quite a few have come in, so we've got a little bit of time. All right, wow, this is long, so let me read this. Okay, first question is, I would be very interested to have your idea how to work in a leather process. Since the control to discover defects are 100% visual to discover them, and every cow is different from another one, and in spite of all the control attention, some defects pass, and even you put some barriers, and oh wow, this goes on. The idea is not to put another value after inspection, thinking in other activities. Inspection is a waste of time. I don't know enough about it. I'm so sorry. I would, error proofing is an actual countermeasure, but you have to understand what the process is, and I'd have to see it in order to understand what to do. I'm sorry, that's just too specific for me to be able to answer. Okay, do you offer a download for the transformation plan? Yes. Where is it? Let me think. It's certainly linked in the book. Oh, I should know this. I think, so most of you are subscribers, some of you are not. So I'm going to give you a link, and you have to promise me that if you're not a subscriber, you will subscribe, because this is supposed to be for subscribers only. And you also have to promise me you're not going to give it to other people. So the link is ksmartin.com, which is our website, /downloads. Now please keep your promise. If you're not a subscriber, please go to ksmartin.com /subscribe. We don't bug you. We don't, put a lot of stuff in your inbox. We don't sell anything. We honor privacy. So we just want to be able to share information with you. Very infrequent mailings. So subscribe and don't share it with anyone else. So ksmartin.com /downloads. It's also linked in the book, and I'm so sorry I don't have the direct link off the top of my head. Okay, next question. How many people is optimal? Oh, thank you for this question. And how long should I follow up actions? Okay, so the team, we strongly believe it should be no more than 10. And this comes after a decade of trying teams of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, up to 20. And with each, what we find is it's just a bizarre thing, but with each person over 10, you get a logarithmically slowing of the event, and none of our events with over 10 people have ended with everything done. None of them. Most of them with 10 or below have. All of them with 6 or 8 have. So you get a lot more cooks in the kitchen, a lot more discussion, and it really slows the process down to get more than 10 people. But you do have to choose wisely. So we start first with what functions do we need represented, and then what level do we need, and then who's the person we need. And so again, we tend to skew it toward directors and above, and try to get as many VPs as possible. Our little rule of thumb is aim as high as you can and go as low as you need to, but never too low. Never. I will not do mapping if I can't get the right people on the team that can authorize the future state design. Oh, how long should I follow up with the actions? Well, so the plans are usually set for 3, 6, or 9 months. 6 and 9 are by far our most common one, sometimes 12, but usually 6 or 9. And the facilitator, in this case, we are the facilitator, which I assume you guys would be the facilitators. They're typically involved in making sure the work is being done, but they're not directly doing any of the work, and they're not, managing the plan per se. Typically, it's typically someone else on the team is managing the plan. The facilitator usually in the beginning goes to the actual review meetings just to make sure that there's no learning or kind of skill building that they need to do if there's some sort of obstacle in the way where people don't know, like for example, let's just say that the plan is to implement a pool-based scheduling system. Well, if people don't know how to do pool, someone has to teach them. So the facilitator usually stays involved through the whole cycle, but from an advisory and coach perspective, if that makes sense. Let me know if that doesn't. And is it important to have a leader of VSM and facilitator too? Yes. So I didn't go into the details, but I'll explain now that we typically have an executive sponsor, and the executive sponsor is typically VP or C-level. In fact, I don't think it's ever not been VP or C-level, CEO, COO, CFO, CIO, CMO, etc. And then we typically also have a value stream champion. So let me back up. The executive sponsor is very often not on the team. In a small company, they will be, but in most mid to large companies, they're not on the team. They're sponsoring the improvement activity, and they're making it part of, their daily work and their plan to make sure that that value stream gets improved the way it needs to. And then the value stream champion, if it's a first effort where there's no value stream ownership yet in the company, they're called a champion at the time that the map is being done and the charter is being formed. And they're typically on the team, and they're typically a director level, maybe a VP level, sometimes senior manager level, and they're the ones that are going to typically own the transformation plan or the action plan. And so they typically are the ones that then hold the meetings and make sure things are going forward and intervene when there's obstacles in a team's way and those kinds of things. And then the facilitator is typically only facilitating the activity so that people, you're serving many roles there. You're mediating, you're watching the time, you're teaching in some cases. For future state, for example, we do a lot of teaching. So you're just basically facilitating the development of those maps and that plan, and intervening with mediation when there are two people that are arguing and they can't seem to get off it, and that type of thing. So hang on one second, let me back up. I lost my question. Good questions are coming in. Yeah, so the facilitator is typically not, we recommend the facilitator be very objective and not necessarily have any skin in the game, no skin in the game. Like a value stream champion is a leader that actually has part of is responsible for part of the value stream. I hope that helps. Okay, next question. We used %CNA in our first value stream mapping event. I love the metric and we'll keep using it. I know, isn't it powerful? It's such a good metric. And one of the senior leaders with a manufacturing background poo-pooed it. I ended up saying, even if it's not something you're familiar with, it doesn't mean it's not a good tool to use. Have you ever experienced similar resistance? All right, so my advice to everybody, anytime you get any resistance of any sort, is to apply PDSA. You have to define what the gap is, and then do root cause analysis on why the gap exists. So here the gap is, you want to use a metric, someone's saying, I don't like it, I don't want to do it. Why? Why did he poo-poo it, or she poo-poo it? Sometimes what you have to do is make sure you've really explained it well, and you need to say up front, look, this is squishy. It is a directional metric, it's not a precise metric, and it's okay. If someone says that 5 out of 10 of the things that they receive require them to do rework, it doesn't matter if it's 5 out of 10, 4 out of 10, or 6 out of 10. You're still going to want to make an improvement because that's too many. It's a directional metric that's very, very powerful. And people don't typically lie. And besides that, you have the supplier typically right in proximity of the person saying that this is what they're receiving, so they can have that conversation and kind of hash it out in a very professional, positive way right then and there on whether the number is 50% or 40% or whatever it might be. So I don't know what the resistance is about. You got to play psychologist, people. You are psychologists more than anything else when you're in the improvement world, and you've got to figure out what the resistance is about before you know what to do about it. So let me know if there's anything more you can add to that, Tim. Okay, next question. I'm not sure if 3 days is enough for VSM because 2 days you should work on current state, and 2 days work on future state, include brainstorming, and 1 day for report out. Okay, so first of all, I don't know when you joined the webinar, but we do 1 day for current state. We have a 4 to 8 week planning cycle, which gets a lot of the data that you need up front and ready to present on day 1. 1 day for future state, and then 1 day for the transformation plan. We have briefings on all 3 days. There's no report out. It's a briefing and discussion. It sounds like maybe this model that you're using is a little different from what we have found to be the most effective. So I have had recently a 4-day value stream mapping activity, and I gotta say I loved having that extra day, and it was a much better design because we had a little more time, but again, 2 days is too much for the current state. My suspicion is you might be at a process level and not a value stream level. You should be able to get, with a good facilitator, a skilled facilitator, you should be able to get through current state in a day or maybe the first 2 or 3 hours of the next day, but definitely not 2 days. It should not take 2 days to do current state, and not for future state either. Because again, future state almost becomes not a no-brainer. I mean, some of them are hard, but once you have a clear understanding of the current state, then the future, you remember, you're not coming up with actual countermeasures much of the time because you don't even know the root cause for the problems that exist. You're just identifying and prioritizing the problems that are going to be on the transformation plan that you're going to work through, and that's why it takes 3 to 9 months to get it done. So I hope that helps. I don't see any more questions. Please raise your hand on your control panel if you're in the middle of typing a question, and I'll hold on for 1 more minute. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. So let me see if there's any hands raised. No, there are not. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope I was clear enough on some of the reasons why we wrote the book, because the leadership level are the ones that need to be intimately involved in this. And if you get anyone saying to you, I don't map, mapping's a improvement team thing. Make sure they understand this isn't about the map. It's a strategic look at how you do business, and who better to look at the strategic direction you want to go in than senior leaders? Who better? Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good rest of the day or evening or night, wherever you may be, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.